All right. Thank you, Ron and team. Thank you for the prior presentation. And we're going to dive deeper into AI and Gen AI here with this presentation. So, quick introduction. My name is Alex. I'm Director of AI at Clario, and I currently have the opportunity of leading our Generative AI department. And I have over 10 years of experience leading the development of advanced AI technologies from medical image analysis, conversational AI, speech analysis, and various modalities. So here, really happy to be talking about generative AI and how it applies to clinical document analysis, right? To put things into perspective, I'd like to introduce you to Clario very quickly, right? So Clario is a global healthcare research and technology company that has contributed to the delivery of over 26,000 clinical trials and over 800 regulatory approvals across over 100 countries, right? So when you think about that, of course, that means a lot of data. And for those that are aware about clinical trials, there's large volumes of information, both structured and unstructured. And interestingly, study protocols are one type of unstructured data that is heavily important in a clinical trial. And at a high level, they essentially provide a comprehensive view about the clinical trial's objectives, the design, the methodology, the experimental process, and so on. So it has a lot of important information. What's really challenging about analyzing clinical documents such as study protocols is the fact that they are complex documents. I think about study protocols of 100 plus pages that includes images, diagrams, tables, specialized language, acronyms, and so on. So how do you go about analyzing that information? And if you look at, for example, table structures that you might find in study protocols, and this is a very simple representation of that type of table, you might have a schedule of events, right, that happen throughout the clinical trial. You can, let's say there's an EEG, ECG, and so on, different operations, activities happening during the trial. And it lays out when that should happen with footnotes and so on. So how do you go and interpret that information effectively and accurately in combination with the text, in combination with the images and the diagrams? And how do you do that at scale, right? If you're looking at thousands of documents, how do you go and precisely analyze that information so that you go from unstructured document to structured information? Now, with the advancements in large language models, it's now well known that you can use LLMs for much more than chat, right? They're fantastic at conversational AI, but you can actually use them for natural language processing very, very effectively. And there's different techniques that you can use them. You can use zero-shot learning, few-shot learning. You can use them for classification, entity extraction, summarization, and so on. Right. So the list is quite big now with the latest generations of LLMs. And you can also apply prompt engineering to quote unquote fine tune instructions as you instruct the LLM to extract information, classify, and so on to ensure that you have accurate information returned by the model. And if you want to talk to your document, if you want to extract information from your own proprietary information and documents, an effective method that's now very well known across the board is retrieval augmented generation, which allows you to essentially pull information and use that in combination with LLMs. Right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here since it is well known, but at a high level, RAG is essentially the process of taking your document, breaking it down into chunks, and using a model type called an embedding model, which essentially vectorizes that information. And then you store that vector into a vector database. And then you have a prompt or a question or a retrieval query, right, to go and find information relevant to your question and generate and pass that to the LLM for generation, for answer generation. So that's the basic technique of using RAG to essentially answer questions about your information using LLMs. And that's pretty effective, right? In fact, you'll probably get some really easy, quick wins. Assemble a few people, a few engineers to, using the latest technologies, latest open source frameworks. You'll be able to put something up very quickly. That seems to be very efficient, and you'll get a quick win, right? But the reality is that if you're doing this at scale, if you're doing this on complex documents, what you might see, in fact, in reality, is that you'll get accurate results for one document. You might get 10% accuracy on the next document, 25, 0. It's going to be very inconsistent throughout a large data set. So it's important to actually look at that holistically with a pure R&D perspective, such that you do have accurate results and not just base yourself on one example or one prototype. So basic RAG is actually not enough from our experience to deal with complex unstructured information with multimodal documents, such as study protocols. So what we found as part of our R&D and our research and our product development is that there are, in fact, 4 core pillars to effective document analysis with GenAI. Right, so if we start at the beginning here, you've got the concept of parsing, which is you take a document, you extract the text, you extract the information from it. And if you're dealing with documents such as study protocols, you want to make sure that you have image understanding and table understanding capabilities as part of that parsing process, because there's some important information in tables, there's important information in images, there's footnotes, and there's other aspects that you need to account for if you want to do accurate analysis and summarization. You always have to consider data privacy as part of that process as well. So choosing the solutions, the technology, the frameworks to do that parsing requires an experimental process for your use case and do this effectively. The other pillar that we've identified and known in industry is the concept of retrieval. Right, that's part of RAG, where you want to retrieve information to generate an answer. What oftentimes is missed is that the choice of embedding model, right? The model that is used for encoding your information to a vector and then doing similarity search, for example, semantic search. That choice of model is actually really important for a use case, because not all embedding models are built and trained the same way, and some achieve higher accuracy for specific use cases. So you want to look at that as part of your whole implementation. You also want to look at chunking strategy. For example, if you're factorizing your document, what is the good size of chunk? Is it sentence based? Is it multiple token based? Is it full paragraph based? Is there any overlap, and so on? And there's different strategies to retrieve information as part of your search, right? To then feed that into your LLM. There could be a simple top K approach, which works really nicely in some use cases. Maybe you need to do a hybrid search approach, which is a combination of semantic and keyword-based retrieval. Right, so there's a lot of strategies that need to be researched, and you need to identify the right ones for your use case. And of course, again, especially in the clinical world, healthcare world, data privacy is super important, right? So as part of your retrieval, where you store your information, what kind of technologies you use, and which vendor you use, you have to take that into consideration. Then the third pillar is around prompting. So you want to make sure that you experiment with zero shot and few shot. So in the classification context, for example, few shot learning can be very effective. You give some examples and you're able to then repeat that process on unseen data. You want to fine tune your instructions. You want to look at transferability to unseen data, right? So in my previous slide, I talked about maybe you'll get great results on one document, but not so much on the second. And so prompting strategies have an impact on that transferability to unseen data. And of course, if you're using one or multiple LLMs, you want to look at the prompting strategy that is specific to the LLM. And finally, the generation pillar. So that's when you actually use the LLM for generating answers or for classification and so on. You have to look at what context size does that LLM support. So some models support about 4,000 tokens, some might be 100,000 tokens, and so on. So depending on your use case and how you're using the model, you need to take that into consideration. You also want to look at reasoning and classification capability. Maybe you want to infer information based on the context, or maybe you just want to classify it in one category or another, for example. So choosing the right model for that is important because they're not all made equal, and not trained in the same way, and so on. And of course, instruction quality and latency costs are super important as well aspects. So think about the problem you're trying to solve. Maybe that top-notch model is not the one you need, right? And of course, again, data privacy that you need to take into consideration.
Hey, Alex.
Yes.
Vinod has a similar role to you within Bear. He's got some questions about how you select the pillars. Vinod, could you ask your question?
Yes, Ron. First of all, thank you, Alex. A briefing on the 4 pillars. My question is more into, is there a criteria for like model selection and its evaluations?
Right. So yes, model selection. So you need to look at it from an R&D perspective, right? So you have a specific problem you want to use. And so what you'll want to do is experiment with different LLMs and look at the accuracies that you're achieving. And of course, you can do some forward research before you do that experimentation. So you look at different LLMs, how they're described, what they've been specialized for. Some are specialized more for chat, some for instruction following, and so on, or a combination. Some are smaller, right? So you can have a 3 billion parameter model that is fine-tuned for classification on this type of data versus a larger, more capable model. You think about, the GPT models, families of models that are very large, but also very capable from a reasoning and holding a conversation, right? So depending on your use case, you have to think about those problems and look at which one does it make sense for me to actually apply.
Okay, so in short, should also be part of assessment, right, for inducing this particular parsing, retrieval, prompting, generation framework.
That's right, exactly.
Sure, thank you.
Absolutely.
And by the way, people keep asking questions. I'll monitor the chat and Q&A. Want to keep it as interactive as possible. This is great stuff, Alex.
All right, thank you, and thank you for that question, Vinod. So you've got those 4 pillars that we've seen as being super critical. And one aspect we don't often talk about is budget, right? So a lot of people have the misconception that you actually have to go and do continuous pre-training on your LLM and you need millions of dollars to train your own LLM, right? That is often, most generally not the case, right? You can use those 4 pillars and you look at specializing on those 4 pillars to be able to essentially achieve really high accurate results for your specific use case without having to train or continuously train your LLM at hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of cost, right? And of course, we're not talking about training a large language model from scratch. And one aspect you also need to consider heavily is multimodal, which is different modality like text, images, and videos, and also multi-modal, right? I'm emphasizing this multi because what we've seen from our research and our product development is that one model does not rule all. You've got some fantastic, super capable models that are extremely strong, but sometimes they don't actually do well in specialized tasks. You might go for a cheaper, faster model that actually does better at that task. So it's important to break down your problems so that you can test out these different models. And maybe you do go for a fine-tuned model that you fine-tune yourself. You might want to go for open source as well, right? So Hugging Face is your friend. There's some great models out there, but be cautious. Big name companies put some open source models out there. They're fantastic. They might not be good for your problem, right? So they might not result in good accuracy for your problem. So you want to do your own evaluations, and that is extremely, extremely important. So if you take all of that, those lessons learned, those experimentations that we've done, we've been using that for solving real problems. So an example, going back to the document analysis use case, what if you want to extract key information, thousands of data points, hundreds of data points from your documents in a very structured, standardized way, not chatting, right? You want to extract that in a structured way. So how do you go about doing that? Like if you want to extract therapeutic area, indication, business lines that should be involved in your company, scheduling, reported outcomes from patients, and so on. How do you achieve that? What we've put together is a custom-built generative AI platform that runs on AWS. So we've got everything logged down, secure. Privacy and security is super important for this. And what we've done is we've built essentially an orchestration engine that allows us to combine different types of models. So parsing and analyzing a study protocol document, we've seen that we achieve best results when we combine different large language models for specific data points. Some might be useful for multiple data points, some may not. So we can specialize our analysis through that orchestration of different LLMs, but also different deep learning models, such as image to text understanding. So you combine all of that into one process. And we're using components, yes, like Bedrock, like SageMaker, and also have some self-managed AI services that we built and that we are running in our cloud platform. So assembling all of this together allows us to achieve extremely high accuracy results, right? And to give you a real life example, I was talking about specific data points, right? So this is an example, a subset of data points that we extracted from a 150-page study protocol that included images and tables and so on. We're able to extract key fields, right, in a very structured way. We're able to classify based on the information in the document, should a specific business line be involved, and so on. So with this process, we can analyze one document in a few seconds, and we can scale that to thousands of documents and use that same concept at a meta level to essentially analyze across those documents and extract key insight from all of those study protocols. All right, just to keep track on time, I'm going to jump into recommendations based on our lessons learned through that iterative process, right? It's really important to be incremental from our experience. Start with a simple problem, learn from that, and keep building. It's traditional iterative development. Another aspect that we see being super important is taking a standard machine learning approach to evaluating and validating models. And you'll hear a lot in the industry that GenAI can't really accurately measure accuracy, it's not deterministic, and so on. In fact, that is incorrect in the sense that you can evaluate accuracies. You do have to follow a standard approach, which is you create a human labeled data set. So if you take a study protocol, you know which fields you want to extract. You go through a large set of documents, note down which are the expected answers, and then you go and test that with your system, right? So you can have a quote unquote training set and a test set, validation set, and so on, right? Using traditional machine learning validations. So you want to make sure that your test set is in fact super representative, right? That's critical. You don't want to have your system tested on 2-3 documents. It looks great, the answers are good, I'm ready to go prime time production. Well, what you'll want to do is expand that test set to unseen documents to make sure that your accuracies remain, right? So traditional AI/machine learning procedures, right? And as I mentioned a bit earlier, you want to optimize for your pillars before you go all in on fine-tuning and continuous pre-training. That is costly, that is it's highly experimental in the sense that you need to try, repeat, and try. And you may not need that at all, right? So if you're able to use the best LLMs for your task at hand, the best models for your task at hand, and make sure you build the system effectively. A big part is really around the retrieval and the prompting and the parsing, right? Those are key elements that you need to solve for with your own data. And here on the last bullet point, not all use cases are the same, right? You might have, you build a flow, orchestrated analysis, everything works great on one use case. It might not work as well for the next problem that you're trying to solve. Yes, you have a foundation, but you may need to actually use different models for those tasks. And if I go back to the study analysis, for example, you might have an LLM that is extremely good at extracting the indication or the therapeutic area inferring that information based on context. While another LLM might be best for title extraction, simple things like that, right? So overall, follow an R&D process, very experimental in nature. You have to have experiments with expected results, with hypotheses and so on. And then from there, build, iterate, and improve. And with that, thank you very much.